everybody. Welcome to our very first Wednesday live in the midst of our relationship series. It's called Real Relationships. That's the series that we're going through on Sunday mornings. It's building relationships in a fake world. We want real, authentic relationships.
Yeah, and
so
you are so real. You're like the realest person.
You're the real one, as you said yourself on Sunday.
Yeah, be a real one.
Yes. So we can't wait for you to join us on these Wednesday lives. Between each message, we have a lot more content that we would love to bring to you and share with you as we are all growing in relationships. And Wednesday nights, along with community groups that are taking place, are a great place for you to grow even greater.
Yeah, grow deeper. Mm-hmm. So we're in this series, Real Relationships. Make sure you come back. This Sunday It Starts With You, Part 2.
Yeah.
I'm going to be sharing another word that I believe is really going to strengthen us, encourage us as we grow in who we are so we can grow in our relationships and in Christ. But also Wednesdays, these, kind of additional content nights, these lives, you need to be coming back for those. Next week, actually, we're going to have a panel of youth or young adults.
Yeah.
And with
some
our youth pastor, Sam.
Some are married, some are singles.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be a great panel, especially for all the single people out there, any young adults. I would encourage you to jump on next Wednesday, 7 p.m. live and listen. But then in the successive Wednesday nights as well, we're going to have incredible, people on, having conversations about relationships, how to grow relationships. And so be tuning in Wednesday at 7 p.m. And if you miss it, what's great is it's on YouTube. You can watch it back anytime on demand. So do that.
Yes.
But this series, I feel like for us and why we want to do these Wednesday nights is just realizing in this season how much people's relationships are suffering and struggling.
Yeah.
And I think that now more than ever, we recognize how much we need people, community, but also the forced isolation, the forced working in tight, spaces, because a lot of couples are working from home together with kids, some still going to school from home. That, man, you look around and there's just a lot of stress on us, even with everything happening in our country, continuing, even recently this week with another, murder shooting by a police officer. It just feels like the tensions in our lives and in our relationships are running very high. And I think that that's why we have to be rooted in the Word of God and in who He is and in our identity in Him and what He and how He's called us to be as followers of Christ in relationships, in marriage, in with coworkers, with our children, with our friends. Otherwise, we're going to be hopeless. And there's a lot in this world to make us hopeless.
Right. And fakeness is something that people grow very weary of in relationships. And so when we've been so distant from one another in a time of COVID and everything that we've experienced in 2020 and into 2021, the distance, I think, has created even emotional, relational distance, and authenticity has been lost because everything is seen through a screen and you're not face to face, you're not touching one another. It's just not that real connection.
It's hard to get real.
Yeah, it's hard to get real.
When you're not like this. And and we live in a fake world. That's what this series is all about. Plastic, I would say mirages that we see. People paint this perfect picture. I even talked about it on Sunday. I showed a picture of our family and I'm like, wow, everyone after they saw this picture, which you and I both posted, were like, oh, family goals, relationship goals. Oh, you guys are so perfect. And I'm like, what you didn't know was that we were, 35 minutes late. And as a result, Christy and I were arguing on the way. And my son was like, Dad, Mom, can you stop yelling at each other? And we're like, we're not yelling. We're just talking intensely.
Passionate.
Yeah.
We're passionate people.
We're talking intensely. And we got there and it was a constant fight for them to not get dirty, and our daughter fell and skinned her knee, but we post this picture and it looks so perfect.
Yeah.
And let's be real, often the picture rarely if ever, tells the true story.
But we're not saying to not post pictures, because it's interesting. I've seen in this day of social media, even when we're posting our vulnerable posts, it somehow has created a platform for somebody to talk about how great they are because of how vulnerable they are. And so there's so much
That's
layers.
Too deep. I don't know if I can handle that
there's
right now.
There's too many layers to this authenticity issue in our world, and we've got to get rooted and grounded in the Word once again to really navigate relationships well. And I think we did a great, you did a great job of preaching that message. And I guess I want to ask you, what brought you to the place of writing this message, and you know, why are we starting it off with, you know, a two-part sermon that talks about it starts with you in a relationship series? I mean, I know some people want some dating advice, they want marriage advice, they want relational friendship advice.
Well, I will say this. For this next Sunday, I'm actually going to dive into 1 Corinthians 13, which I've heard a million times. You know, like, you guys know this. 1 Corinthians 13, love is this. But I felt like God gave me some really, you know, great revelation in preparing ourselves.
Yeah.
Because we need revelation, but we also need preparation.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that some people get the revelation, but they don't do the hard work of the preparation.
Yeah.
Because preparation takes work. And so I felt like in this series, and especially week 1, which God kind of took it in a total different direction than I was planning. You know, I dug in and shared from Romans chapter 12, which that text is in my ESV version, there's a little paragraph heading and it says, marks of a true Christian. And so I challenged us that this is what a real Jesus follower looks like. And in a fake world, there's a lot of fake Christianity. And I actually started by sharing from the book of Matthew, and I shared from Matthew 23, where Jesus calls out the Pharisees, and he's like, you are whitewashed tombs. You know, on the outside, everything looks pretty and white and clean and perfect. But inside, there's rotting flesh. There's like a dead thing inside.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what religion has done, and what I think even this season the church has got caught up in is that we try to make everything look perfect. Even churches' social media accounts try to make everything look perfect.
Right.
And then that, like, the culture that has told us to make everything look perfect then trickles down to the church and followers of Christ. And being real means, like, we have to acknowledge our shortcomings, our failures. We have to acknowledge that religion gets you the praise of man. Yep. And often, like, you look good on the outside, but you're dead inside. While as relationship with Christ is where on the outside, people may not praise you the same way, but you're getting the praise of God. And so your heart is right. And it has to start there for me.
Well, I love what you're saying. Just as you were talking, I was thinking essentially what you're saying is that the antagonist to real relationships is religiosity. And religiosity is really trying to act out your faith from the outside in. But a relationship with God and a Christ follower who's building a relationship with God understands that the work of faith happens from the inside out.
Good.
And so that's the whole idea of behavior modification versus heart transformation. That's religion, behavior into heart, when really true Christianity is, you know, heart transformation and then behavior modification.
Yeah, I was thinking about it, like, even from a if we're talking food standpoint, health food, like, there are people who look really good on the outside.
Yeah.
You know, like, I've seen some dudes that are shredded, you know, like, jacked, like, muscles coming out every part of them. And then, you know, you dig in, and then I've had conversations with guys who've gone through that process and have acknowledged to me and said, like, dude, I was super unhealthy because they were actually on steroids. And they were eating everything in sight, including horrible food. And so on the outside, like, it all looked like it was money, you know? But inside, literally their insides were dying.
Right.
And their doctors were like, I have a friend who went through this, and their doctor's like, you have to stop or you're going to die. Like, you're going to die young.
Wow.
And that was, like, such a testament to me and a testimony of, like, man, we can do a good job of painting the right picture. Yeah. Even with religion. Right. Even with, like, righteousness. And yet, if it's not the work of Christ inside of us
right.
That's happening, then we may actually be dying. And we don't want to get to the point where the death happens.
Right.
And we've seen that in people spiritually, where it's like this breaking. And so my challenge to people is like, hey, when it comes to relationships, because the whole point of the series is helping you grow, you know, in your relationships, helping build healthy, real relationships in a world that's fake, is that it starts with us.
Yeah.
Like, if we're not healthy individuals, how could we have a healthy marriage?
Right.
If I'm not healthy as Caleb, Chrissy's husband, how could Caleb and Chrissy as husband and wife be healthy?
Right.
Even if you're the healthiest person, you could be the healthiest wife of all time. But if I have unhealth, then there's going to be unhealth in our marriage.
Especially if in marriage, you're to become one, right?
Yeah.
And you can't have the whole other side of you, of that oneness, be unhealthy without it impacting you. Now, I'm not saying that on your own you can't be seeking God and you can't be healthy on your own,
Right.
but the marriage will experience a level of unhealth and maybe a little bit more work in trying to maintain health. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think like the whole idea behind this first week was that you'll never have the health you want relationally until you establish the health you need spiritually.
That's right.
And so that's why I kicked this week one off, like talking about it starts with you. How are you doing spiritually? Like, are you a real Jesus follower? Because if you are, right, if you are a real, true Jesus follower, then the health you want relationally is going to little by little begin to fall in line because you're following him.
Right.
And if we follow him and we become more like him, then we embody more of him, and that will create the health that we need in relationships. And I think what a lot of people are looking for, even in relationship series, is like, tell me the how-tos to have a good marriage, the how-tos to be a good spouse, the how-tos to maximize my single life, the how-tos in dating. And it's like, let's start with, how do we follow Jesus right?
Right.
Because if that's right, I believe the other things will fall in line.
Absolutely. And, you know, some people wonder why we choose the sermon series that we do. And yes, for sure, there was a moment where, you know, relationships are really suffering in this time. But one thing that we also recognize is that God is doing something specific in our church. And the previous series that we were in right before Easter was a series called The Rising Church. And we feel like the people of God, Project Church, and the Big C Church in the world is rising in the midst of chaos, despair. Like, we are serving a God who is bringing hope. And so there's a church that is rising. And so when I look at this sermon series, I don't think it's just about having the goal of a healthier marriage, finding a mate. It's not just the goal of you being a good girlfriend or boyfriend or you doing single season well. This is about you being the church well. The church is rising and you're a part of it. And relationships build the church. Relationships build the kingdom of God. And so essentially what you're talking about is if we're great followers of Christ, then the church is going to be healthier. And as the church rises, more people gain health, they gain life, they gain freedom. And so really our heart behind this whole series is that the church would continue to rise, and it's only going to rise and fall on the health of the relationships within the church.
I mean, we've said it, you've heard it said probably hundreds of times in different churches, is that we believe the local church is the hope of the world. And what this world is trying to do right now is fix systems. Yeah. And I'm going to just like, I'm gonna be real with you because I hear it all the time, and I get the cry for like, changing systems and changing, politics and changing all these things in the world. But at the end of the day, right, like there is a serious problem, and it's rooted in sin. And you could change all the systems, but if people's hearts are still broken, and they're still like angry and hateful and resentful and racist and bitter, there's going to continue to be abuse. It doesn't matter how perfect the system is in place, because people will never succumb fully to a system. Their humanity will always override it, and they'll go outside of it. And so that's why, like, we want healthy relationships in the church, because then our health attracts health. That's what I've found.
Yeah.
And health builds health. As the church rises, becomes more healthy, has more healthy relationships, we are more attractive to the world.
Yeah.
They're drawn in, and then their relationships begin to get better. Their hearts get right with Christ. And that's where true change happens. Revival starts in the church, and we've been talking about revival. We did it last Wednesday night. If you missed last Wednesday, you can go back and watch our first Wednesdays. But it starts within the church.
Yeah.
And then that revival pours out of the church to a culture, to a city, to a people. And that is the only way that we're going to truly change the hopelessness of this world.
Right.
And that's why I think this series is so important.
Right. And taking it back to the whole point of this first message, it starts with you. Revival starts in our own individual hearts, and then it overflows from there into our relationships, into the greater church, into the world. And so, man, I'm really excited to see where God takes our church as we grow in healthy relationship. Remember, it's not perfect relationship, it's healthy relationship. We will continue to have conflict, so we will be talking about things like how do we do conflict well? How do we honor God in our disagreements? How do we honor God in messy relationships? It's inevitable. There's messy things that are going to take place in your marriages, in your dating relationships, in your friendships. It's just inevitable, but I really think that God's going to reveal himself to us, make us a healthier church, make us healthier individuals, and he'll be glorified in it.
Yeah, so as we continue in these Wednesday nights and this series on Sundays, I really want to invite you guys to go on this journey with us, because I think that so often it's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day, and life happens, and church doesn't always become a priority.
Yeah.
And I think for us, now more than ever, I'm we need our church engaged in what's happening, because if we are all engaged together and the change is happening together, we're going to grow together, and then the church is going to rise together.
Yeah.
And so here's my shameless plug and ask of you, is that you would engage on Sundays.
Yeah.
If you can't be there, you would watch it either live or watch it back. You'd be a part of all 5 weeks of this Real Relationship series. I believe it's going to help bring health and realness to your marriage, your singleness, your dating life, your friendships, your relationships with your coworkers, all of these, your neighbors.
Yeah.
And so engage on Sundays, those 5 weeks. And if you can be a part of these Wednesday nights, I think this is just added content that's going to encourage you, strengthen you, build you up. So tonight was kind of just an intro, and us wanting to encourage you and welcome you and invite you into this journey with us on real relationships, building relationships in a fake world. Let's be real, take the mask off, because God needs a real church. Be a real one.
But keep the masks on until further notice.
The COVID mask, that is. That was funny.
Love you guys, and we can't wait for you to join us on these Wednesday nights. We can't wait to see you on Sundays. We really love you. We love